Today on Fear and Greed, falling household spending puts pressure on the Reserve Bank to cut interest rates. Relations between Canberra and Moscow hit a decade low on reports an Australian soldier was executed in Russia. And a new global report says too many people are being diagnosed with obesity and it's not for health reasons. Plus, Telstra pushes into AI, a bidding war for one of Australia's oldest home builders, and the US regulator sues Elon Musk over his purchase of Twitter. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Thursday, the 16th of January, 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, household spending fell nearly 2% in December after a surge the previous month thanks to Black Friday sales. It's all adding to calls for a rate cut as early as next month.
Fingers crossed, Michael. Fingers crossed for all we mortgage holders. The CommBank Household Spending Insights Index shows a drop in spending on household goods. Things like clothing, department store sales were down. Consumers pretty much brought forward their spending to take advantage of sales activity in November. There were big declines in hospitality, food and beverage, recreation, that type of thing. What's really fascinating about the CommBank's Household Spending Insights Index is that it takes information from 7 million customers, that's about 30% of all consumer transactions, throws it into the Mixmaster, the Fear and Greed Mixmaster, and comes out with a view on what's happening around spending. Clearly, consumer spending has slowed. Consumer spending is the biggest part of the economy. If consumers are spending, we're much more likely to get economic growth. Very important, but it looks like that growth is slowing.
Can I ask you a question on that, Sean?
Yeah.
To what extent is it a worry if it is just shifting forward? So say a lot of the spending on goods, retail spending, if that's being brought forward to be part of the Black Friday sales, how big a concern is that? Is the bigger concern perhaps the decline in, say, hospitality and others that you wouldn't think is brought forward to another month and should be pretty strong in the lead up to Christmas?
It's all seasonally adjusted, so it's kind of December on December. There's that. But your point is valid. We're worried about the trend here. We're not worried about 1 month's numbers. And certainly if all this spending's gone on in Black Friday and it hasn't gone on in December, and part of the recreation and all that would be because people spent their money on Black Friday sales. They didn't have it for Christmas, that type of thing. So what you really want to look at is a run of data, and that shows that retail spending is weak, undoubtedly. And that's kind of what we keep an eye on. The Reserve Bank, it will be meeting on February 17, 18 to talk about interest rates. The key piece of data ahead of that is inflation figures for the December quarter. That comes out on 29 January. If that shows underlying inflation getting close to the target band, to getting close to that 2 to 3%, then there's a real chance they will cut interest rates. Remember that monthly number from November, the underlying rate got down to 3.2%. That triggered all sorts of speculation that might happen that the rate cuts might actually happen in February. Another thing to take into account, it'll be early days in the Trump administration. But if in the first month, Donald Trump comes in, hikes tariffs, kicks non-citizens out, that will be extremely inflationary. If you kick a lot of immigrants out, they are often in low-paid jobs. Who's going to do those jobs? It's going to cost more to find people to do it. So you will have wage price inflation. It is very early when it's only about a month after Donald Trump takes power that the Reserve Bank meets, but they'll have some idea of what he's talking about. Stephen Halmarick, the chief economist at Commonwealth Bank, he's calling for a rate cut next month. He reckons there'll be 4 this year. It doesn't quite mean he's predicting a rate cut next month, but he reckons that it should happen.
So the Reserve Bank really does pay close attention to what's happening elsewhere in the world, because we always joke about the fact that the RBA kind of runs its own race. But, I mean, it's still paying attention to global factors like what happens in the US with Trump, right?
Yeah, and I mean, particularly if he throws 60% tariffs on China, what's that mean for the Chinese economy? I mean, theoretically, he should be throwing big tariffs on Australian goods as well.
Yeah.
So we'll get some sort of indication that first month.
Gosh, it is a huge start to the year, isn't it? It is really quite extraordinary. You wouldn't be expecting, kind of here we are halfway through January, and we're already talking about such big economic moves.
So true.
Now, Sean, relations between Canberra and Moscow are at a very low ebb at the moment after reports that 32-year-old former Melbourne grammar student Oscar Jenkins, who had been caught by Russia while fighting for Ukraine, has been executed.
Foreign Minister Penny Wong said that the government has made urgent inquiries into Jenkins' well-being. She's asked Russia and Ukraine for information. She said yesterday that all options are on the table. The Russian ambassador, Alexei Pavlovsky, was called in to meet with the government. 7 News reported that Jenkins had been executed and his body had been found. This is the gentleman who was captured while fighting alongside Ukrainians late last year. Opposition leader Peter Dutton supported the government. He said the envoy should be sent packing if it's proven that Mr. Jenkins has been executed. Clearly, this is the lowest point between Canberra and Moscow since the downing of MH17 back in 2014.
Sean, Macquarie Asset Management, which is part, as the name suggests, part of the Macquarie Group, will invest $8 billion in US-owned data centres.
Up to $8 billion, actually. It's a big deal. Step 1, they're going to spend $900 million US in Applied Digital's data center campus in North Dakota, Applied Digital being a company. Step 2, invest another $4 billion US in future Applied Digital's data center campuses, whatever they've got coming up. That's $5 billion US, which is about 8 billion Aussie. Macquarie Asset Management will get a 15% stake in Applied Digital's high-performance computing business. It's got a bit of a history in data centers, Macquarie Asset Management. It, along with a pension fund, owned about 88% of AirTrunk, which was sold last year for $23.5 billion to Blackstone. That was a massive, multi-billion dollar windfall for Macquarie Asset Management. It just shows, they're putting their money back into data centers. It is the boom sector. When, Amazon, Google, they're all out there searching for more processing power, more space to house growth, particularly around AI platforms, cloud computing operations. Everyone wants data centers. Macquarie Asset Management doubling down on it.
A very relevant interview coming up after the show today, Sean. You're speaking about Aussie tech stocks with Sean Wyke from Wilson Asset Management.
Yeah, so Aussie tech stocks, some really great Aussie tech stocks out there, WiseTech Global, Pro Medicus, Xero, etc. We don't actually talk a lot about them. So we asked Sean all about what the outlook was for them over the next 12 months or so. So we didn't talk about the Nvidias and Apples and Microsoft. We actually talked about the local guys. It's a great chat.
Yeah, it really is. It's coming up after the show, so stick around for that one. In the meantime, Sean, we have got a lot to cover. So we're talking Telstra's push into AI and a big home builder takeover bid and plenty of market moves. Lots still to come. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Telstra will spend $700 million rolling out artificial intelligence across its entire business.
Apparently, it's one of the biggest deployments by a corporate in Australian history when it comes to AI. It's a joint venture between Accenture, which is the consulting group, and Telstra. Accenture will help Telstra roll it out. The goal is to transform how the telco interacts with customers and operates its network. It could result in staff losses. The report actually was in the Financial Review yesterday, and the Fin Review said that Telstra was set to make an announcement. Now, there was no official announcement from Telstra yesterday, but it does seem to be happening.
Now, among the best performers on the share market yesterday, Sean, was home builder AV Jennings, which closed up 8% after it received a new takeover proposal from a group in Singapore.
We've discussed this company, and you've laughed at my memories of growing up in country New South Wales, and it makes me a very proud old builder. It used to be the ad for AV Jennings.
And I come from a different generation where I remember the AV Jennings ads, which was dreams can come true and AV Jennings will build them for you. Remember those ones?
Yeah. No, man.
Anyway, we're not here to advertise AV Jennings.
We are not.
We're here to talk about a takeover bid. Go on.
So, Hobie, H-O-B-E-E, Hobie Land offered $391 million for the group. That's 70 cents a share. Hobie has already got 5.4% of the company. It comes after American group Proprian Capital Markets offered 67 cents a share. That's $374 million back in November. The company's at 69 cents per share. That's what it closed at yesterday. It's doubled since the first bid. It is definitely in play.
Much else happening on the local share market in the last 24 hours or so, Sean?
Iron ore stocks are doing okay, helped by a 2-week high in iron ore prices back above $100 a tonne. Banks, mixed. Property companies, they're sort of outperforming at the moment because of the expectations that rates in Australia might fall sooner rather than later. Telco stocks not so good, thanks to Telstra. Tech stocks not so good. A lot of that was around WiseTech Global. It lost 3.7% yesterday, closed at $115 a share. Now, that's its lowest since late October. It's not quite clear who's selling. Plenty of speculation, but it is only speculation, it's not fact, that Richard White, the founder of WiseTech Global, is selling. Not sure, though.
Okay. Global markets, what's going on there?
Well, the reports that the Trump administration might ramp up tariffs over time rather than impose them in one hit, on day one, were welcomed. They took the steam out of the US dollar. That helped the Aussie dollar to push back around 62 US cents. Bitcoin has risen as well. It's trading above 96,000 US dollars a unit. On Wall Street, reports that Meta will cut about 5% of staff have emerged. That's about 3,600 people. And Eli Lilly's share price dropped. Now, it lowered revenue guidance for obesity and diabetes drugs. We'll talk about those obesity drugs a bit later in the show. But the December quarter for demand for those particular drugs wasn't as high as expected.
A little bit of state-based news, Sean. There was chaos across the Sydney train system yesterday after maintenance workers went on strike.
So it's all about pay. It involves the Electrical Trades Union and the Rail, Tram and Bus Union. 8 in 10 services were delayed or cancelled in the AM peak hour yesterday. About 1,000 trains in Sydney apparently were delayed or cancelled in the 24 hours. Basically, fewer trains, large crowds. There were replacement buses, but you need 20 replacement buses for one train. And when you're in peak hour, that doesn't fly.
God, that puts a lot of vehicles onto the roads, doesn't it?
It does. The New South Wales government said it's exploring legal options to end action. More action is planned for today and potentially tomorrow.
And an audit into the Queensland health system says it is in urgent need of reform after years of breakdowns across infrastructure, cybersecurity and patient care.
The Queensland Audit Office said the system's facing mounting costs, worsening wait times, underwhelming performance on preventable hospital admissions, among other things. The maintenance backlog cost has blown out to $2 billion. That's up 40% in just 12 months.
Wow. Turning to international news now, the US Securities and Exchange Commission has sued Elon Musk over allegations that he misled shareholders about his Twitter stock purchases, escalating the agency's. Well, it's been a long simmering feud, hasn't it, with the billionaire?
Yes.
This has been bubbling along for a while now. It feels like it's coming to a head.
I think you're right. I think it's more bubbling than simmering. Simmering's like light bubbles. I think this is like mid bubbles, I'd say.
It's a mid bubble.
We're heading.
Feels like we might be getting too technical with the analogy here, Sean.
The lawsuit claims that Mr. Musk delayed disclosure of his ownership, that's of Twitter, allowing him to save more than $150 million on buying Twitter stock. According to a report in the Wall Street Journal, the late disclosure hurt investors who sold at artificially low prices because they didn't know about Mr. Musk's plans. The lawsuit comes after a long investigation that Mr. Musk sometimes delayed by basically not appearing for testimony. He is very closely aligned with President-elect Donald Trump. The speculation is that the SEC will get a new commissioner shortly when Donald Trump takes power, and he'll ask that commissioner to withdraw the case. If that's what happens, a very, very big test for the independence of the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Now, you mentioned earlier, Sean, the diabetes and weight loss drugs. A new global report says too many people are being diagnosed as obese, pushing demand for weight loss drugs when in reality definitions probably need to be a little bit more nuanced.
Yeah, so doctors should consider the overall health of patients with excess fat rather than just measuring their body mass index, according to a report from 50 medical experts. It was published in the Lancelot Diabetes and Endocrinology Journal, something which I obviously look at every quarter or month or however often it comes out. More than 1 billion people are estimated to be living with obesity worldwide, and prescription weight loss drugs are in very high demand. But those with chronic illnesses caused by their weight should be diagnosed with clinical obesity, according to the report. Those with no health problems should be diagnosed with pre-clinical obesity. That nuance really will distinguish those who are unwell and those who are well, Currently, in many countries, obesity is defined as having a BMI, body mass index, over 30, a measurement that estimates body fat based on height and weight. Access to weight loss drugs such as Wegovy, Ozempic, is often restricted to patients in that category.
And just quickly, Sean, a bit of an update on what would have been probably one of the most extraordinary stories that we had towards the end of last year. South Korea's president has now been arrested after a standoff with police.
Yoon Suk Yeol was arrested yesterday morning following a pre-dawn raid by police and investigators on his fortified hilltop compound, according to the FT. Yoon's detention followed a 6-hour standoff between law enforcement officials and members of his security detail. It's the first time in South Korea's history that a sitting president has been arrested. Now, remember, he failed in his attempt to impose martial law last month. That triggered a slump in confidence. He was suspended from duties. He was then impeached by Parliament in December following his attempt to impose martial law. He then effectively went into hiding and had his security detail stop people entering his compound. Anyway, yesterday morning, he finally got arrested.
And it's just extraordinary to think this is all unfolding in a country that is really an economic powerhouse, right? With big companies, like multinational companies like Hyundai and Samsung and Kia and a bunch of these other ones, that there is so much political instability in a country that you would expect to be a lot more stable.
Yeah, totally. I don't know much. I don't know much about South Korean history, but from Western eyes, which we are, it does seem extraordinary that it happens.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Your guest today, Sean Wyke from Wilson Asset Management, all about Aussie tech stocks. It is coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 16th of January 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.